Well, the World Cup Trophy has arrived in our nation's capital as Canada gets set to co-host the global tournament next month.
In 2012, Canada was 112th in the world. Now we're one of the top 30. That's a 75% increase. I'm an economist. It's a 75% increase. We belong on the pitch with the best teams in the world, and we're going to see that.
Carney taking a moment there to kiss and hoist the trophy as he welcomed FIFA President Gianni Infantino to Ottawa on Sunday. The Prime Minister also saying the popularity of soccer has grown in the country since its first World Cup appearance in 1986. The trophy is here, of course, as part of a trophy tour. Canada's first game of the World Cup is set for June 12th in Toronto.
Something happened at a ceremony in Toronto this week that stopped people mid-scroll when the clip hit the internet. Canada's Prime Minister picked up the world's most famous trophy, kissed it, scored a goal on camera, and then said something about Canada that nobody expected. Canadians are used to seeing Mark Carney in a specific context: trade negotiations, tariff retaliation, CUSMA deadlines, the kind of governance that involves spreadsheets and legal frameworks and careful diplomatic calibration. The version of Carney who showed up when the FIFA World Cup Trophy arrived in Canada was someone entirely different. He was smiling the way people smile when they are not performing happiness for a camera, but actually feeling it. He was joking. He was telling stories from his childhood. At one point, his heartbeat monitor, the kind worn during exercise, apparently registered 178 beats per minute during a particular recollection. That detail alone tells you this was not a staged political moment. That was a genuine reaction from a man who has followed Canadian football for 4 decades and watched his country go from the basement to the world stage. The trophy arrived with a kind of institutional backing that reflects how seriously the global sports and business community now treats Canada as a host nation. Coca-Cola, one of the largest corporate sponsors in FIFA's history, was present and actively involved. Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, the company behind the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Raptors, Toronto FC, the Toronto Tempo women's basketball franchise, and the PWHL Scepters, was represented by its leadership. Alessandro Nesta was in the room. The man widely considered the greatest defender in Italian football history, a World Cup winner with 78 international caps, now lending his expertise to Canadian football through the Montreal Impact. When Carney noted Nesta's presence and described him as the best defender in Italian football history, therefore the best defender, the room understood the specific weight of that statement. That level of talent, choosing Canada as the place to invest the next chapter of his professional career, is the kind of signal that goes beyond a ceremony. Carney's personal story about the 1986 World Cup deserves its own moment because it grounds everything else he said about Canadian football in a lived experience rather than a political message. In 1986, Canada played its first ever World Cup in Mexico. The team was led by Captain Bruce Wilson and was composed of trades, people, and students. One of the team's strikers was a classmate of Carney's at university, John Catliff, who still lives in Vancouver. Canada's first match was against Michel Platini's France, which Carney acknowledged was somewhat sobering, but the team wore the maple leaf on the world's biggest stage and played with full commitment. Carney said he watched every single game of that tournament from his parents' basement. 40 years passed between that basement in 1986 and the ceremony where Carney lifted the trophy in Toronto. In those 40 years, Canadian football transformed. Alessandro Nesta arrived. World-class talent came to Canadian cities. Coaching academies spread from Victoria to St. John's, and the results followed. Canada's women's team won gold at the Tokyo Olympics in 2021. Christine Sinclair broke the all-time international goal-scoring record, a record she still holds. The men's team qualified for the Qatar World Cup. When Canada played Croatia in Qatar, Carney was not in the basement. He was at the stadium. He was wearing a heart rate monitor. When Alphonso Davies scored, his heart rate went from approximately 60 to 178. That is the specific number he cited, not a metaphor. A documented physiological response to watching Canada compete at the highest level. The statistical dimension of Canada's footballing rise is the kind of data point that lands differently when delivered by an economist. In 2012, Canada was ranked 112th in the world. At the time of the ceremony, Canada is inside the top 30. That is a 75% improvement in global ranking. Carney noted he is an economist. he recognized the number. Canada belongs on the pitch with the best teams in the world. The federal investment attached to the World Cup arrival is also documented and specific. The government announced the largest investment in sport in Canadian history, $750 million directed at both elite performance and grassroots participation. The funding covers podium programs for excellence at the top level and playground infrastructure for full participation at the community level. The government is backing Canada Soccer's National Training Centre, creating a permanent home for the sport in Canada. 330 soccer projects across the country were announced the Friday before the ceremony, from live match viewings to community soccer programs designed to bring all Canadians together during the tournament. The deeper message Carney delivered throughout the ceremony was not primarily about football. It was about what football represents in the current Canadian moment. The world's most recognized sporting trophy arrived in a country that has spent the past 2 years demonstrating it is not dependent on American approval for its economic future. A country that has signed 20 new trade agreements across 5 continents. A country building the G7's first commercial small modular reactor. A country that sent LNG to China for the first time. A country that scored the largest graphite mine in the G7. A country attracting foreign direct investment at twice the rate of other G7 economies adjusted for size. And now a country hosting the FIFA World Cup, the largest single sporting event on Earth. National confidence is not an abstract concept. It is built through accumulated specific demonstrations that a country belongs in the rooms, on the stages, and at the tables where the most important things happen. Canadian football's rise from 112th in the world to the top 30 in 13 years is a version of the same story that is playing out across Canada's energy sector, its defense procurement, its critical mineral strategy, and its Arctic infrastructure. The direction is the same in all of them. It is upward. It is faster than most people expected. And it is producing the kind of moment where a prime minister can pick up the world's most famous trophy in front of a room full of business and sports leaders, kiss it, score a symbolic goal, and ask Canadians to cover the country in flags. Carney watched the 1986 World Cup from his parents' basement. He watched Qatar from the stands. He is hosting the next one. The flags Carney asked Canadians to display are not just decorations for a sporting event. They are a statement about what kind of country Canada has decided to be in this particular moment in history. While much of the world is retreating inward, raising tariffs, closing borders, questioning alliances, Canada is hosting the planet. Every flag on every porch and every storefront between now and the World Cup final is Canada's answer to a world that keeps asking whether this country has the confidence to step forward. The trophy arrived. The flags are coming out. The answer is yes. The story of Canadian football from 1986 to today is also the story of what happens when a country stops apologizing for its ambitions and starts executing on them. In 1986, Canada went to Mexico as amateurs, playing against the world's best. They lost every game. They went home. And for nearly 2 decades, Canadian football remained a quiet afterthought in a country more focused on hockey, basketball, and lacrosse. What changed was not luck. It was deliberate investment in coaching, infrastructure, youth development, and the willingness to bring world-class talent like Alessandro Nesta to Canadian cities where that expertise could multiply through an entire generation of players. Alphonso Davies did not emerge from nowhere. He emerged from a system that was built intentionally over 20 years by people who decided Canada deserved to compete at the highest level. That is the exact same philosophy driving every other major Canadian initiative right now in energy, in defense, in trade, and in Arctic sovereignty. Decide you belong. Build the infrastructure. Show up.